Okay, so learning aim B is all about obedience. So we're just going to talk about, what is obedience, types of obedience, what makes people more or less obedient. This stuff you do know, okay? We've gone over it at length in class. So this is just jogging your memory about all of the different discussions that we had, okay? So what is obedience? Well, obedience is doing what you're told by a person in a position of authority. Okay, the difference between this and conformity really is that direct request. If someone tells you what to do and you choose to do it, then that is going to be obedience. All right, and we've got our two different types of obedience. So we've got our conscious obedience, where you need to think about what you're being asked to do and whether or not you are going to do it. All right, so conscious obedience, you're going to be very aware of your actions and your consequences. It's generally when you're given something to do that is not necessarily out of the ordinary, but not following a routine. So for example, fabulous festive fitness fun Friday, that was something that we only do, once a year. So I'm telling you to do something on that particular day. You're choosing to do that, or in a couple of cases, not choosing to do that. And then obviously that is going to fall under conscious obedience. All right. So if you're thinking about it, I ask you to do something, or Manning asks you to do something, the boss asks you to do something, a member of college staff asks you to do something, then generally that is going to be conscious obedience, because you, in your brain, you make a choice about whether or not you are going to do it. Unconscious obedience is more where we're into the realms of habit and routine here. So we could argue by this point, coming into college on the days that are listed on your timetable, you don't really think about those kinds of things. You kind of just really do them. So it falls more into unconscious obedience, because it's more of a habit and a routine. Now, we talked about the different levels of obedience where we might place it on a scale. So obedience is going to be at one end of our scale, being told what to do by a person in a position of authority. At the other end of the scale is going to be full-on conformity, internalization of conformity, believing from the group pressure. And then in the middle is going to be that compliance, with the most basic form of conformity, just kind of going along with what you're being asked to do. But obedience, being told what to do by a person in a position of authority. All right, so then we've got to think about what affects people deciding to be obedient. And really this comes down to Raven's bases of power. It's not in the spec, but it's a really good way of thinking about how we can get people to become more or less obedient. All right, so the first one we're going to be doing is status. Not status, status. So what status does that person hold? What position does that person hold within the organisation, or necessarily outside of the organisation? So for example, people inside the college, teachers, members of staff, working your way up, boss, big boss, etc. All right, and if we're out on the street, is that person a police officer? Is that person a member of the public services? What status and influence do they have over us? For example, do you listen to your doctor? If they tell you to do something, they have status and influence over you. Do you listen to the people at home? They have a status and an influence over you. Whether you choose to do it, and the status or the influence that person has is going to change people's levels of obedience. It's either going to increase their levels of obedience or decrease their levels of obedience. Obviously, the main one that we talked about was the fear of punishment. People doing what they are told because they fear the consequences. All right, and again, we had long discussions about people speeding. We had long discussions about people downloading music and films illegally because, they don't fear that any punishment there. They don't think they're going to get caught. All right, but if we start to increase the punishment, then obviously that could be a way of people increasing their levels of obedience. Is it a perfect system? No, but is it a simple way of getting people to do what we want? Yes. If we go back to Raven's base of power, that would fall under coercive. Obviously, the other way of getting people to do things that we want them to do is to reward them, give them stuff. Here's what I want you to do, and if you do it, here's some stuff that I'm going to give you. All right, and those rewards can either be extrinsic or intrinsic, which we'll come on to when we talk about B3. Is it going to be stuff from outside, or is it going to be stuff from within? All right, we can offer people rewards to get them to do what we want them to do. All right, and then lastly, how does that person feel about authority? If obedience is doing what you're told by a person or by someone in a position of authority telling you to do something, obviously the level of respect that you have for that person is going to affect your levels of obedience. And the more respect that you have, the more likely you are to obey. The less respect you have, the less likely you are to obey. We see it as I have to deal with some of the wonderful members of the college environment when I ask them to do something and they've got zero respect, therefore they have zero levels of obedience. Okay, so B1 and B2, pretty simple. types of obedience, the features of obedience, doing what you're told, conscious obedience and unconscious obedience. All right, and then the factors that affect obedience, how can we get people to be more or less obedient? All right, the status of the person giving the order and the influence they have, either rewards or punishments, and the respect that people have for authority will all affect levels of obedience.